People love to say that money can buy almost anything. And most of the time, it feels true. But in the early hours of April 15, 1912, as the Titanic sank beneath the freezing waters of the North Atlantic, money became useless. In those final moments, wealth meant nothing. Influence meant nothing. Power meant nothing. So what if I told you something uncomfortable? What if I told you that the most important thing in your life, the salary you work for, the savings that make you feel safe, the money you think you own, isn't as solid as you believe? What if I told you that governments and central banks can create this money out of thin air, silently erode its value, and still expect you to treat it as something sacred? Sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? It isn't. This is the world we live in. And the moment everything changed didn't come with chaos or panic. It came quietly. On a Sunday night. While most people were relaxed, distracted, or half listening. August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon went on television and calmly announced that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Foreign governments would no longer be able to exchange their dollars for something real, gold. He said it was temporary. He said it was an emergency measure. It was neither temporary nor an emergency. That night, something fundamental broke. Money stopped being a promise tied to something tangible. The dollar became nothing more than a promise backed by trust. Trust in a government's word. To understand why this matters, we need to go back a bit. After World War II, the world agreed on a system called Bretton Woods. Currencies were pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. 1 ounce of gold was $35. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Inflation was contained. Trade was predictable. Gold acted like an anchor holding everything in place. But by the late 1960s, cracks began to show. The United States was spending heavily, the Vietnam War abroad, social programs at home. Dollars were flooding the global system, but America's gold reserves weren't growing at the same pace. Other countries noticed. They started asking a simple question. Can we have our gold now? And that's when the promise collapsed. Nixon closed the gold window, and it was never reopened. By the mid-1970s, the world had entered a new era of money, fiat currency. Money that exists because governments say it does. Money with no natural limit. No hard brake. What's truly shocking is how quietly people accepted this. There were no riots in the streets the next day. Stores opened. Paychecks cleared. Life went on. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. For the first time, the entire financial system was built not on scarcity, but on trust. And history tells us something very clearly. When trust becomes the only anchor, cracks eventually form. We've seen this before. The Romans slowly debased their silver coins. Emperors needed money for wars and luxury, so they reduced the silver content of their currency. Inflation followed. Trust collapsed. Trade broke down. An empire that prided itself on order watched its economy rot from within. Centuries later, in China, the Yuan dynasty experimented with paper money. At first, it worked beautifully. Then the rulers printed too much. Inflation exploded. Merchants refused the currency. The system collapsed. Centuries change. Technology changes. But the temptation stays the same. every time rulers detach money from real value, they abuse that power. And every time, the cost is paid by ordinary people. That's why 1971 wasn't just a single decision. It was the latest verse of a very old song. The difference this time was scale. Rome collapsed alone. The Yuan dynasty collapsed alone. But in 1971, the dollar wasn't just America's money, it was the backbone of the global system. When it detached from gold, the entire world followed. At first, it felt like freedom. Central banks could cut interest rates. Governments could spend. Growth could be stimulated. People adapted. The inflation of the 1970s was painful, but the decades that followed seemed calmer. A new belief was born. That economies could be managed. Fine-tuned. Controlled. But here's the truth we don't like to admit. Systems like this aren't designed for stability. They're designed for momentum. Debt must grow. The money supply must expand. Trust must be constantly propped up. Like a shark, it has to keep moving, or it dies. And that's exactly where we are today. Since 1971, global debt has exploded. US federal debt alone has gone from hundreds of billions to tens of trillions of dollars. The numbers are so big they no longer feel real. And every time the system shakes, the dot-com bubble, the 2008 financial crisis, the pandemic, the solution is always the same: more money. More credit. More intervention. We're told this is stability. It isn't. It's acceleration. You can see the cost in everyday life. In 1971, an ounce of gold was $35. Today, it's over $2,000. Homes that once cost $25,000 now cost hundreds of thousands. Wages have risen, yes, but not enough. Most people feel this instinctively. Working more. Saving less. Owning less. Paying more for everything. And yet we're told this is normal. This isn't just an American story. When the dollar broke from gold, the world followed. Today, all major currencies float. All central banks play the same game. And here's the hard truth. Trust works until it doesn't. History shows us how this ends. Weimar Germany. Argentina. Again and again, the same cycle. Excessive spending. Inflation. Devaluation. Reset. So now comes the uncomfortable question. If this pattern is so obvious, why do we believe it won't happen again, on a global scale? The system we built after 1971 rests on a single fragile thing: trust. When that trust cracks, there is no easy exit. And yet most people never ask the most basic question. What is money? Money is not a law of nature. It is a human invention. A collective agreement. A story we all agree to believe. And over time, that story has become more abstract, more detached from reality, and more open to abuse. That's what brings us to the edge today. Digital money. CBDCs. Programmable currency. Total visibility. Total control. If money already runs on trust, imagine a world where it can be switched on or off with a button. Some believe crypto is an escape. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But that's not the real lesson here. The real lesson is about power. Every time money breaks away from something tangible, those in power gain flexibility, and everyone else takes on the risk. Governments overspend. Banks profit. Corporations borrow endlessly. And when the system breaks, the burden falls on ordinary people. So what do? We stop pretending. We stop believing comforting stories. We study history. We understand the system for what it is. Because real wealth isn't just money. It's awareness, adaptability, the ability to see illusions before they collapse. The day money stopped being real wasn't just a moment in 1971. It was a warning. And warnings only matter if we listen. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has answers, and I'll show you where to find them.